told you that a man shoots his neighbor's son, gets away with it, claiming a ridiculous legal defense in Florida. Put up the picture full mask. This is an update to a story. Florida, a murder charge against a 79-year-old Edward Drew Zalowski was dropped Friday after he successfully argued that he shot his neighbor's adult son in self-defense. Let me give you a reminder of what happened. The suspect was arrested in September 2023 after confronting a 42-year-old Brian Ford, who was on Edward's side of a fence. He was trimming tree limbs along the two men's property line. In a call to 911, the wife of Drew Zalowski said her husband, quote, just meant to scare him, end quote, when confronting Ford with a firearm. That's according to court documents. Ford, who was with his 8-year-old son, reacted aggressively, investigators concluded. The two men exchanged words, and Ford reportedly threatened the defendant with a chainsaw, prompting Edward Drew Zalowski to draw the firearm. Edward told police he warned Ford and told him, quote, to get off his property, and Brian said something to the effect of mind your business, followed by profanity. The De Leon, Florida resident said he then aimed his gun at Ford, who allegedly responded, quote, you are pointing a gun at me. Are you going to shoot me? And move closer.
He's reading this article like it's a poem or something like that. Like, get to the fucking point, dude.
Or I'll shoot. Ford continued to advance even after the older man dry fired his revolver on an empty chamber. Quote, he said his firearm holds 6 rounds. And to just a moment to properly contextualize what's happening.
Yeah, it sounds to me like it's obviously a justified self-defense shooting. I mean, one guy was on another guy's property. He was confronted, and then he threatened the guy who confronted him. He had a chainsaw in his hands, and then he advanced towards the other guy. I mean, I don't know what you exactly want. Like, of course, the court's going to dismiss the charges given those circumstances.
You have an individual with a gun who is threatening to kill someone because they have the audacity to trim tree limbs.
Are you fucking retarded, Rashad? What in the fuck are you talking about? You're kind of missing the part of the story where one guy threatened another guy and then advanced towards him with a deadly weapon. You absolute fucking dipshit.
That's what this is.
Also, why is your camera constantly going in and out of focus? Like, what in the fuck? Like, isn't TYT like a multi-million-dollar organization?
About cause and effect is important. You cannot argue the effect and not analyze the cause. What is the cause? Pettiness. What is the cause? A lack of value for human life. I value the life of everyone involved more so than I would ever value the issue that we're arguing about. He was charged with second-degree murder. In his defense, Edward cited his age, physical condition, and the size difference between him and Ford. His fathers did not provide convincing evidence that Edward Drew Zalowski.
Yeah, the other guy also had a criminal background and had a violent reputation, is what Rashad is leaving out here, technically.
Retreat the rule over the controversial law to the original defense. The original defense is not simply a stand your ground defense. The original defense is stand your ground contextualized through these other factors that aren't supposed to be highlighted, such as age, frailty, the inability or lack of capacity to fight.
Yeah, I mean, if you threaten an elderly man, you can't be surprised he's more likely to shoot you than want to throw down with you. I mean, that's kind of obvious. So what?
These are not supposed to be part of it. Here's why. Because it creates an inequitable dynamic in the law. Because this would suggest that under no circumstances could a particular individual ever be able to argue that what you did, sir, was actually murder. Because you have all these other frailties that the other individual does not have, meaning there's inequity in the...
Yeah, it sounds like you shouldn't threaten him with a chainsaw and then advance towards him. In fact, you probably shouldn't even be on his property in the first place. How about that? Don't go on his property in the first place. Don't threaten him with the chainsaw. Don't go towards him. And you would have been fine.
Law itself, if it is applied successfully in your defense. That was one of the main arguments against stand your ground prior. That a young black male who's healthy and athletic could never utilize this type of argument against an older individual if the roles were reversed. And now you have an actual court case that has allowed this kind of defense.
It's funny that he doesn't give an example of a black person who should have been able to have utilized that law, but for some reason wasn't allowed to
be cross-contextualized in the defense of stand your ground as a reason for immunity. What else do we have? In a very ironic way, the authorities all believed that this...
Bro, he uses the word ironic incorrectly so fucking often. It's wild. I'm blown away that no one has corrected him on that.
Man committed murder initially. The prosecutor charges, the police arrest, there's an actual indictment, and then the argument before members of a jury based on the statutory language of the law creates an atmosphere that lets them go. What's really happening? Policy is allowing murder. That's what's happening. Policy is allowing murder. Understand the cause and correlation. Where you have these ridiculous laws that allow for castle doctrine interpretation or stand...
I thought this was supposed to be a debate between him and somebody else. Oh, okay.
Ground interpretation. These states also have increased homicides with these policies enacted. That's no coincidence.
Yeah, I'd like to see the source on that, but okay.
When it comes down to it, it's simply inhumane to ever think that a neighbor is dead because of the trimming of tree limbs.
I swear, how they retcon what actually happened and rewrite history and just completely disingenuously tell the story as if something completely different actually happened is wild. All he was doing was trimming some tree limbs and then he got shot over it. It's yeah, dude, you're kind of missing an important part of the fucking story.
On a particular property line. What say you?
I hear you, Doc. I have a different take on this story, just based on the limited evidence that I was able to, understand from the story. I think that, yes, the stand your ground law is problematic in some ways, but in this particular story...
Also, he was on the other person's property, so I'm not even sure if the stand your ground law would even necessarily really apply here. I don't think you would need to use the stand your ground law, right? Because you have the castle doctrine, and he's technically on another person's private property. I thought the stand your ground law referred to when you're not on your property.
There also has to be some recourse that a man can take when he's being threatened on his own property by a neighbor. And the man who was killed's own son testified basically against him, saying that he was threatening the elderly man. You threaten somebody on your own property, that's at your own risk. You do so while holding
on their property, you mean?
Chainsaw, that's at your own further risk. And the man, Kozlowski, who killed Ford, warned him he was going to shoot, fired an empty round first, fired a second empty round, and the guy kept approaching him. Supposedly, it was what the trial seems to have come forward with, and said, "Are you going to shoot me?" Is cussing at him and threatening him worse. at some point, when are you supposed to be able to protect yourself from a threat on your own property?
Ben, I'm glad you brought that up because you had a different point of view when someone else went to a property and was the aggressor. Who was the aggressor in this story?
I mean, the aggressor, as far as who started the initial altercation, was Edward, the homeowner. But the person who started the hostile, interaction was Ford, the guy who got shot. When you say the aggressor, to me, I would say that Ford was the aggressor because he started a threatening verbal altercation with somebody when he was in the wrong. I don't even know if that even matters, to be perfectly honest, but he was on somebody else's property. He should not have been there. And then when he was told to leave, he got irate and started threatening the homeowner, which is incredibly inappropriate.
I mean, initially it sounds like Kozlowski was the aggressor of
that is correct.
Ford. Yes, but when you're
that doesn't make him the aggressor, though. I mean, he started the altercation, but he didn't start the aggressive altercation. He didn't start the threatening. He didn't start the violence. He didn't have a chainsaw and threaten to kill anyone with a chainsaw. You're saying that he was the aggressor just by mere nature of him being there, confronting somebody else and being armed. But he didn't tell the other person that he was going to shoot him until the other guy threatened him with a chainsaw and then advanced towards him. You have to understand, the guy gave him several outs. He could have just simply walked away. Instead, he aggressed towards the guy with the chainsaw. Of course, anyone's going to defend themselves in that situation.
When it's on your own property, you have the right to ask them to leave. If they don't leave, you have the right to continue to ask them to leave. And if they become threatening, and if they're holding a chainsaw, which is a weapon that can easily murder somebody, at some point, you are defending yourself.
You have the right in 11 states to commit that crime and get away with it.
I mean, that's just your interpretation of what happened. Commit a crime and get away with it. It's stupid.
You understand how policy contextualized the outcome of this? Because trespassing does not equate to your ability.
You're so fucking dumb, Rashad. Please go back to whatever fucking law school gave you that degree and go and get your fucking money back.
Ability or capacity to murder somebody. It doesn't. 11 states in this country will allow you to kill somebody and have immunity based upon a castle doctrine like
Rashad, you're really dumb, bro. Somewhere along the line, someone told you or several people told you that you're more intelligent than you really are. It's unfortunate. Okay, what you're saying would only be true if the part where the guy with the chainsaw threatened the other guy and then came towards him with the chainsaw, and we had the son to corroborate that story. If none of that happened, and the guy merely shot the other guy for being on the property with the tree trimmings, then you'd have a point. Yeah, of course. You shouldn't just shoot somebody for being on your lawn, chopping down a tree or whatever. Yeah, of course. But that's not what happened, Rashad. You're conveniently leaving out a huge part of the story.
And your ground, a permeation of that doctrine. But
permeation, oof.
Once again, we're back to a policy dynamic because remember, a grand jury agreed this was murder. Police agreed this was murder. The DA agreed this was murder.
So what? And ultimately a court decided to not pursue charges. So what?
And when you argue the facts before
Rashad, if you actually believe a jury would convict this guy of murder, you are insanely stupid. I mean, especially in Florida. In California, nobody would do it. What are you thinking, man?
Jury, with the statutory language of stand your ground, the prosecutor has to prove another element outside of the traditional element that would have been allowed prior to the policy being passed. So my point to you is this, and I understand your disagreement. You're wrong. And let me tell you why you're wrong. You don't get to be the aggressor and threaten to kill somebody over something that's not even a misdemeanor, but an ordinance violation.
Bro, I mean, I can't believe he is this fucking stupid. I just cannot believe it.
And because you threatened that individual then threatens you back.
Dude, you're making it seem as if the guy walked up to him with the gun and immediately started threatening to shoot him, which even if he did do that, which he didn't, we have the son to corroborate what happened. Okay, Ford was the aggressor here verbally to begin with. He started threatening the old man. That's what happened. We know what happened. But even if it did play out the other way, your reaction from Ford is to just get off the man's property.
Which now you have a mutual combat situation.
It's not a mutual combat situation, dingus. They didn't agree to a fucking duel.
And you decide to use your gun to kill them. It doesn't matter that the first two shots did not shoot. We're taking at face value what the man is saying. We don't know if those first two shots were intentional to kill or not. I know that
he's saying that he had a revolver and the first two rounds were on an empty chamber. So basically he's saying that he gave the guy a lot of outs because he had to sit there and cock the gun and pull the trigger 3 times before a live round came out. That's what he's saying.
If you did this in Georgia, those first 2 shots are just as customary as if you tried to kill somebody. The only contextualization would be if I believed your story rather than the fact that you did pull the trigger twice, and that would, of any objective observer.
Oh, bro, you need to learn how to talk like a normal fucking person. Holy fuck, what is this? It's like the Michael Scott thing. Sometimes I just start a sentence, I don't know where it's gonna go, and I'm hoping I kind of find myself along the way at some point. It's like, holy shit.
Would say, well, you just tried to kill a man with 2 bullets, but you got him on the 3rd one. Do you understand that? Once you pull the trigger.
No, he again, there were no first 2 bullets. He said that he had an empty chamber. The point he's making is that he gave the guy a lot of outs. He pointed the gun at him and pulled the trigger 3 different times. If at any point during that time the guy had just walked away, he would be alive. It's not like the old man shot the other guy in the back. The guy was advancing towards him, Rashad. Holy fuck, what are you not getting about this?
Trigger, brother, you pulled the trigger.
I mean, I think that's case dependent, yes, unless you can prove that you always did keep 2 chambers empty for warning and for safety reasons. I think, yes.
How would you prove that?
That is very hard to prove, but it's very hard to prove. So that's a fair point for sure. But also, at what point, if
I mean, you could just ask somebody that knew him if that was a practice that he spoke of, for one, but who cares? Who cares about that? That's a small point.
Somebody, God forbid, was on your property, Doc, and had a chainsaw and was coming at you and cussing, and you said, get off my damn property now or I will shoot you, and they said, you're going to shoot me, and got closer to you, at what point are you allowed to interpret that as a threat?
Once again, you leave out the element that started it. You don't get to be the aggressor and then cite a policy dynamic. What do you think?
Bro, this is just like babbling. You're just babbling at this point. None of this means anything. The old man was clearly not the aggressor. He confronted another person on his property. That person decided to assault the old man. You're basically making the argument that the old man is inherently the aggressor because he has a firearm on him. And that is absolutely not fucking fair, because by that logic, nobody could ever have a firearm with them in any situation and ever have any kind of altercation with anybody else, or they would always be presumed to be guilty of murder, even if they didn't actually physically or violently act aggressively towards anybody else, which is ludicrous.
Kyle Rittenhouse was about. Kyle Rittenhouse was an aggressor. He was an agitator.
Again, no, he wasn't. The opposite. Again, you're using the same exact argument. He has a gun on him, therefore he's the aggressor, which is absurd. No, those people attacked Kyle Rittenhouse. He was the victim there. Now, whether he should have been there in the first place is another discussion, but in the moment that he was there, they attacked him, so he would be the victim. He didn't shoot anybody who didn't attack him first.
Allowed based on policy to get away with shooting individuals that he was an aggressor against, and being in illegal possession of a firearm at that.
What? No, bro, all this stuff was litigated fucking years ago, you moron. He was not in possession of an illegal firearm. We know all this. That was the first charge to get dismissed in the court, stupid. Did he just forget that or something?
Once again, it's trespassing, Ben. Ben, it's
that's very different,
brother.
And also, the situations don't have anything to do with each other anyway, because this old man was on his property, so who cares?
Trespassing crime. Call the police. It's a trespassing crime.
What if he had acted violently towards the police and the police had shot him? That would be okay? Well, what's the fucking difference, Rashad? He doesn't have an obligation to call the police. If he sees somebody on his property and just wants to tell him to leave, he has a right to do that. He has a right to do that without being threatened to be murdered with a chainsaw and attacked, you fucking idiot.
This wasn't on his own property, but the man's own son testified against his own father, saying he was threatening the elderly man.
He was an 8-year-old child who admitted that his father did utilize aggressive language back at the neighbor who came to him with a gun. I promise you, if somebody come to me with a gun, they're going to get aggressive words also. Guaranteed.
Well, if you're on somebody else's property and you shouldn't be there and they come up to you with a firearm and you say things like that to them, then what do you want from me about it? Yeah, you attack somebody else and you get shot. Nobody will care.
So the 8-year-old testified to the truth. Once again, the 8-year-old also testified that the neighbor was in fact the aggressor, that his father was simply trimming.
No, the child said that his father was the aggressor. His father was the one who threatened the old man.
Trimming limbs, that his father was not the aggressor. See, these things are to be contextualized properly, dear brother. You can't just...
No, that's not what the son said at all. The son said that his father was the aggressor. His father was the one who threatened the elderly man. That's what the son said.
Dismiss them when, once again, in any other jurisdiction without the ridiculous stand your ground contextualization in Florida, this man would have...
Can you please stop saying the word contextual and contextualize, please? Holy shit, please.
Been, in fact, not only arrested, not only indicted, but also convicted by a jury, given the statutory dynamics. The only thing that made this different is because of the stand your ground law, which, by the way, is...
No, absolutely false. No, he wouldn't be convicted anywhere in this country based on these circumstances. Nowhere, not even in the bluest states.
Echoed by the prosecutor, that it is the stand your ground policy passed by conservatives that made this outcome different than what the outcome would have been. So, Ben, what's the problem with that?
Yeah, no, I mean, you make a good point for sure. And I don't think fatal force needed to be used. I'm just saying we weren't there. And this is on someone's property, which I think makes it a little bit different.
It's on the property line. It's on the property line.
So what? He was technically on the other man's property.
On his side.
It's on the property line.
Once you're not on your property and you're crossing the property line, you're on somebody else's property, Rashad. The man was on the old man's property.
So
I'm just saying, you said if somebody came at you with the gun, they're going to get harsh words. If I'm on somebody's property and they come at me with a gun, I'm getting off that property as soon as possible and not giving them harsh.
Well, okay. Well,
yes, exactly. Your reaction should be to get off of the other person's property because they have a gun and they don't want you on their property. And to be honest, you don't belong on their property to begin with.
That's why most states require that if something like that happens, you have a duty to retreat first.
Yeah, and that's stupid.
Do you understand why it's different in Florida? Like most states will say you have an actual duty to retreat if you feel as if there's a danger, only because that law requires that you care about the life of the other person. So you have this duty to retreat, which is a limit.
I don't think that the duty to retreat thing pertains to a person who's advancing at you with a fucking chainsaw, though, dude. Does it? Once somebody is threatening you with a deadly weapon and coming at you with that deadly weapon, I don't think that has anything to do with the duty to retreat. I think you have a right to defend yourself in that situation pretty much always. Am I wrong? I'd be surprised.
Eliminated in the Florida statute under stand your ground.
Totally. And we can agree on this. People in Florida are aware of Florida's crazy laws. And so you have to be operating your life under the laws of the state in which you live. And so you have to take extra precautions to not fall victim to...
Well, that's an assumption not known in the facts, that he was aware of the statutory elements of the stand your ground law. I'm not aware of all of the elements until I have to actually research it, look at element 1, element 2, element 3. When it comes to a property line dispute, in a subjective way, the man may not have known, Ben, that he was actually violating a property law. Typically, you get 2 to 4 feet of an easement when it comes to property lines. And that's so that the government can come in and maneuver as they choose to within 2 to 4 feet. So you may have had an easement issue. Hell, this may...
What? That doesn't... I don't think that pertains to this situation, though, dude. He was on somebody else's property. Great. Anyway, this one was fun. God damn, Rashad is such a clueless fucking person.